Ja, ich darf jetzt den letzten Vortrag vor unserer Jobmesse ankündigen und freue mich sehr, dass wir jetzt auch, das ist gerade schon ein bisschen angeklungen, auch positive Erlebnisse bzw. Entwicklungen verfolgen dürfen. Der Titel des Vortrags ist Maltas rechtliche und politische Entwicklung im Bereich LGBTIQ. Wer die ILGA Europe Umfragen kennt, weiß, dass Malta da sehr weit vorne steht, was das Erreichte für die Community angeht. Und wir werden heute die Perspektive aus der maltesischen Regierung hören. Deshalb wird der Vortrag auch auf Englisch sein. This input will be in English because a representative from the Maltese government will speak to us, and I am very happy to welcome Luana Camilleri on the stage, who is Manager and Policy Development and Program Implementation Manager at the Directorate at the Office of the Prime Minister of Malta. A hearty welcome to you. Thank you for being with us today.
Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues, policymakers, and activists. It is both an honor and a privilege to be here today to speak with you about Malta's LGBTIQ+ related policies and initiatives, and more broadly, on the evolving relationship between human rights, legal reform, and social inclusion within democratic societies. Over the past 2 decades, Malta has undergone a significant transformation in the field of LGBTIQ+ rights. Once considered socially conservative, the country has essentially transformed and established one of the most comprehensive legal and policy frameworks for LGBTIQ+ equality in Europe and internationally. This transformation did not occur spontaneously, nor is it something purely symbolic. Rather, it emerged from deliberate constitutional reform, legislative action, institutional development, and sustained engagement between government, civil society, and international human rights frameworks. Today, I will provide you with an overview of Malta's LGBTIQ+ policy development from the year 2000 onwards, with particular attention to constitutional and legal reforms, anti-discrimination measures, and gender identity recognition mechanisms. In doing so, I will also reflect upon the wider implications of Malta's experience for other states seeking to strengthen equality protections and uphold human dignity in increasingly diverse societies. At the same time, while Malta's trajectory demonstrates substantial progress, it is important to recognize that serious challenges continue to persist globally. So across many regions of the world, LGBTIQ+ people continue to experience discrimination, criminalization, social exclusion, and barriers to equal participation in public life. Therefore, discussions such as this are not merely national reflections, but they form part of a broader international dialogue concerning democracy, human rights, and the protection of vulnerable communities. Now, to understand Malta's progress, it is important first to situate it within a wider European legal context. So in the year 2000, we have a significantly early milestone with the establishment of the European Union Employment Framework Directive. This directive established a general framework for equal treatment in employment and occupation across the European Union, and Malta had essentially transposed this legislation into its domestic law, therefore creating an important legal basis for protection against discrimination in employment. Now, this step was particularly significant not only because it paved the way for further foundational groundwork and for future reforms, and however, it also paved the way for employment, which basically affects economic independence, economic security, and also social dignity, social participation, and human dignity, And so by incorporating anti-discrimination protections into employment law, Malta had also aligned itself with emerging European standards. However, early legal developments remained limited in scope, particularly regarding gender identity recognition. So in 2004, Malta introduced amendments to the Civil Code, establishing the country's first legal gender recognition procedures. This marked an important development in Maltese law, but still, legal recognition remained heavily conditional upon having to undergo gender reassignment procedures, and it also did not expand to other areas such as, for example, marriage. Despite these limitations, however, we consider this 2004 framework to be a transitional stage between older medicalized approaches to the more rights-based framework which would later emerge. So as we can see, the next major reform took place in 2012. During this period, Malta had strengthened criminal law protections concerning hate speech and hate crime, and such protections were essentially including sexual orientation and gender identity. In the same year, Malta expanded the remit of the National Commission for the Promotion of Equality, so its remit has been expanded to include issues relating to sexual orientation and gender identity, that is, in addition to its existing equality responsibilities in the area of education, employment, etc., etc. Now, the year 2014 represented a major turning point. So for the first time ever, Malta amended its constitution to explicitly prohibit discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, constitutional protection carries both legal and symbolic importance. Legally speaking, constitutional rights occupy the highest normative level within domestic legal systems, influencing judicial interpretations and legislative development. Symbolically, constitutional inclusion communicates that LGBTIQ+ persons are fully recognized members of the national community, entitled to equal dignity and protection. As we can see also in the presentation, in 2014, Malta introduced civil unions legislation granting same-sex couples rights substantially equivalent to marriage. And this reform addressed long-standing inequalities concerning family recognition and legal recognition of partnerships. Now, on the right, we can actually see a photo commemorating this event, so when civil unions were first introduced in Malta. In continuing, one of the most internationally recognized milestones in Malta's LGBTIQ+ legal development occurred in 2015 with the enactment of the Gender Identity, Gender Expression and Sex Characteristics Act, commonly referred to as the GIGESC Act. This legislation adopted a human rights-based approach centered upon self-determination, bodily integrity and personal autonomy. The Act replaced the earlier 2004 framework and fundamentally transformed Malta's approach to legal gender recognition. So under this new legal system, individuals could obtain legal gender recognition based on self-determination without mandatory surgical intervention or sterilization requirements or even psychiatric diagnosis. Importantly, the legislation also addressed the rights of minors, introducing safeguards while recognizing the evolving capacities of children and the importance of informed consent. In parallel with this legislative reform, in 2015, Malta also launched its first LGBTIQ+ action plan. So this ran for the period of 2015 to 2017, and it demonstrated an increasing shift from isolated legal measures towards further coordinated public policy strategies. So this strategy included several measures which needed to be adopted and implemented across government ministries, entities and departments, so essentially brought together different governmental institutions and sought a whole-of-government approach in ensuring equality. In 2016, Malta enacted the Affirmation of Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Gender Expressions Act, which prohibited conversion practices. I apologize, I have to go another slide back. By prohibiting such practices, Malta affirmed that sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression should not be pathologized. This reform also reflected an important evolution in public policy. The transition from merely protecting LGBTIQ+ persons against discrimination towards actively safeguarding their mental and physical integrity. In the following year of 2017, Malta introduced the Marriage Equality Act, which removes distinction between same-sex and different-sex couples within marriage, thereby ensuring equal rights and obligations. It is also important to note that a mechanism was established for couples previously registered through civil unions, so they can also update their legal status in this regard. And in 2018, Malta also continued to strengthen institutional responses towards ensuring equality through reforms, for example, to the national police system, where we aimed at improving the recording and reporting of hate crimes. Other key legal and policy developments in 2018, as we can see in the presentation, includes the introduction of the Embryo Protection Act amendment. So for the first time, there was no restrictions being placed when it comes to medically assisted reproduction, and we also ensured access to fertility treatments irrespective of sexual orientation or gender identity. The SOGIGESC unit was also established within the same year. By SOGIGESC, I mean the Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity, Gender Expression, and Sex Characteristics Unit. This was established within the Human Rights Directorate of Malta, and it also worked towards ensuring and coordinating government policy on LGBTIQ+ equality across public institutions. Trans healthcare was also incorporated into the national health system, so we had the Gender Wellbeing Clinic being established and fully operational, providing several supports such as voice treatment, hormone treatment, but also family support, psychological support, and any other medical issue which is actually being required by LGBTIQ+ persons. Last time I spoke about the LGBTIQ equality strategy of 2015. Obviously, since it ran till 2017, in 2018 we had a new LGBTIQ equality strategy and action plan being developed, which ran until the period of 2022. Once again, we sought to contribute and improve upon the previous LGBTIQ equality and action plan, and we also included additional measures and more areas where obviously improvement was required. Other key policy and legal developments in 2022 include the blood donation reform. So during this time, we have lifted the ban on MSM blood donation, so men having sexual relations with other men could essentially now donate blood. Obviously, eligibility requirements still remained, for example, when it comes to the age of the person, the weight of the person, and also for how long that person concerned has maintained sexual relationships with the same person concerned, but still this does not discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. It applies basically to everyone. In 2023, we have the Amendment to Conversion Practices Act. So as I already mentioned, conversion practices were banned in Malta already, but throughout the years we started to see some legal loopholes when it comes to the referencing, spreading, and also advertising such practices. So throughout this act, we essentially sought to amend the previous one and obviously address such legal loopholes. In 2023, another equality strategy and action plan was initiated. This time it is going to run until the year 2027, and I can say that we have over 90 measures being implemented across 10 different areas in the field of education, ensuring that there is inclusive education, employment, in 10 different areas. And obviously we are trying to ensure that there is accountability and transparency in the adoption of such measures by means of having annual reports being put forward by the ministries concerned. In 2024, we have the Gender Identity, Gender Expression, and Sex Characteristics Amendment Act, where we introduced the recognition for non-binary genders with the marker X. So for the first time, persons who did not identify themselves to be either male or female could make use of this gender marker X in all official documents, and essentially the procedure only required changes to the relevant acts of civil status through a single notary procedure. Something which I would like to mention as well is Malta's significant involvement in international and EU-related initiatives. For example, in 2024, Malta had joined as state co-chairs in the Equality Rights Coalition National Laws and Policies Working Group. And in 2025, a plenary session in Strasbourg, the Council of Europe's Committee of Experts on Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity and Expression and Sex Characteristics unanimously elected Malta as the chair for the 2026 calendar year, following obviously Malta's 2-year term as vice chair. A major milestone was reached during Malta's presidency of the Council of Europe as the committee saw the ministerial recommendation on the equality of rights of intersex persons unanimously approved by the Council of Ministers. And going forward, as I already mentioned and as we have seen throughout this presentation, so Malta had moved beyond formal rights into practical access through healthcare, the Gender Wellbeing Clinic, community-based HIV testing. Obviously, improvements still need to be done, so we are seeking to enforce our own legislation, continuously improve access to healthcare, and even possibly reduce waiting time for such services being carried out. Now, I want to close my presentation with some of my own reflections. So, legal progress does not automatically eliminate discrimination or social exclusion. Challenges relating to social attitudes, mental health disparities, bullying, workplace discrimination, healthcare access, and intersectional inequalities continue to affect LGBTIQ+ communities worldwide, including within states which are considered to be quite progressive. Moreover, international progress remains deeply uneven. So in many countries, LGBTIQ+ people continue to face criminalization, censorship, violence, and restrictions. Consequently, the defense of human rights requires ongoing vigilance, so equality should not be understood to be something as a static achievement, but rather as a continuous process requiring institutional commitment, democratic resilience, and sustained public engagement. The Maltese experience demonstrates that meaningful reform is possible when government, civil society organizations, international institutions, and even affected individuals come together to collaborate in advancing human dignity and equal protection under the law. With that, I would like to close my presentation. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I would be free to answer. And I really look forward to the rest of the discussions in order to promote love, peace, and prosperity. And thank you very much for having me today. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
First of all, many thanks to you, Luana, for this very interesting presentation. Let's see if there are any questions in the audience. Yes, I see one. So thank you for also making this possible. I will just walk over with the mic. Here you go.
I've been wondering for some time now that Malta is kind of a pioneer concerning LGBTQI agenda and equal rights and such. But when we look at women's rights, it's kind of a big discrepancy there. So do you have any explanation on how this could evolve that way? I mean, you had the first LGBTQI action plan in 2015? The first gender mainstreaming plan came into action 2022.
Yes.
So that's, I just find it strange, and I'm really curious on how this evolved in that way.
So essentially, I can say that work is also ongoing in to ensuring equality between men and women in Malta. As you rightly mentioned, there is currently another gender equality mainstreaming strategy taking place nationally. It also incorporates a whole-of-government approach, and we are seeking to analyze the national situation more when it comes to women in employment and women in high positions. How much women there are and how much we still need to obviously work towards that. Still at a national level, we can also say that we are obviously complying with EU-related regulations when it comes to the directive, for example, on women on board. So we have that being transposed into national law, where 40% of companies have to have 40% representation of women. There is also work currently undergoing when it comes to pay transparency, so ensuring that there is equal payment for the service, for equal service between men and women. So I can assure you that work is ongoing. Unfortunately, from the national context, I tend to realize that women are still the primary carers when it comes to familiar responsibilities. So that is something which kind of restricts women going out to the labor force, but the government has already expanded work in that area as well. So quite recently we had free childcare being provided, which would essentially encourage women to go out and search for a job and not just stay in their homes taking care of their families. When it comes to parental leave, flexible working conditions, I can also assure you that these are obviously being implemented at a national level, and essentially they are there for everyone to make use of, both men and women. The reason as to why women continue to make use of them more than men is still being discussed and analyzed. I think it's more of a social mentality, but work is undergoing in that area as well. I thank you for this question. I think we can speak about this more if you have time or if you are willing to speak about this after the conference. But that's all from my end till now. Work is ongoing. We're also constantly seeking to improve our enhancements and our work, obviously without any setbacks, without being actually discouraged by challenges that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. Thank you. I don't know if there is any more questions. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you for all the information you shared with us. Do you happen to have a number on how many people chose the X on their official documents as compared to FRM?
I don't have it with me, to be honest with you. I think we can research it through other ministries. I can collaborate with them quite easily and have it in hand. You can always contact me on my socials. I have my email, yes, present, so I can always get back to you about this, if I may. Apologies, but I don't have the data in hand currently.
But that's a very nice offer. Thank you so much. If there's no more questions from the audience, maybe I can ask one more question, because I was really impressed to see how early Malta has already banned conversion therapies, because we're still fighting for a full ban in Austria. It's also in the current government's program, but it hasn't happened so far. And also we recently saw the European Citizen Initiative, I think I'm double mic'd, maybe that's the sound. The European Citizen Initiative that was also taken up by the Commission. Yes. Do you see any room for a European ban on conversion therapies?
A European ban. Essentially, ECIs play an important role when it comes to ensuring that there is involvement of EU citizens, because obviously sometimes we tend to look at EU institutions as something out there, and we are citizens quite on the lower scale, and we can do nothing about it. But essentially, we really can work towards ensuring that our voices are heard. Now, when it comes to EU legislation, I'm pretty sure that there is ongoing work about this and discussions within council formations. Essentially, it is a little bit difficult because this is something of national discretion, and I realize that a lot of EU member states continue to face problems when it comes to legalizing and illegalizing certain actions. So there is definitely a push at an EU level. The fact that the Commission had accepted this ECI initiative and the fact that many signatures got collected on such an initiative EU-wide is already an important and a huge step towards that. I hope that we can actually see several advancements in this regard, not just on EU conversion practices and the illegality of such practices, but also on other areas when it comes to parentage, for example, because I realize that it's not legally recognized in all EU member states. Surrogacy is still illegal in many EU member states. So once again, I hope that there will be improvements. But still, given that this is of national discretion, I think the EU is limited when it comes to its legal push towards these.